It's the last mailbag of Cincinnati Bengals training camp, and a lot of your questions are around roster surprises or surprise roster cuts. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and you can subscribe to this show on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts and become an everydayer, become a first listener, making us your first listen as you listen to this podcast every day and don't miss an episode. We appreciate each and every one of you who is part of one or both of those clubs. Today's show brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. They'll help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And James, today we're diving into another preseason mailbag. A lot of questions about surprise roster candidates, surprise roster cuts, breakout candidates. But let's start with the Joe Burrow question. I feel like that's just the right thing to do on any Bengals podcast. Sergeant Huday is curious, and I think we've alluded to this at times, but what the expectation is for Joe Burrow's return to practice.
I like the when, because
I think
the when. Would you say?
I think the when, yes.
Yeah, the when. All right, so I'll do a when in how it's going to happen, because I think I have a decent idea. When, I think it's going to be the middle of next week, where we'll see him on the practice field, we'll see him in a helmet, and we'll see him throwing the football. How much, the team reps, all of those things, I don't think that happens next week. But as far as like install, some individual stuff, I think he can go through that. The walkthrough stuff, which obviously isn't open to the media, I think he will be in on that stuff starting, I would say, late next week, Wednesday, Thursday, in that range. I think we'll see Joe Burrow on the practice field. I don't think he'll be doing everything, but he will be out there, and you will see video of him doing something. And then practice will shut down for us, media, and then he'll probably ramp it up, and he'll have a good week of practice going into that Browns game. So I think that's kind of the track that they want, that the plan is, because he's getting work in now. I know Zach Taylor on Monday, when I asked about the throwing, is he continuing to throw? He didn't give me the answer, but I can tell you he's throwing regularly. He's progressing well. He feels good. And so everything is pointing to him being back, I would say, in the middle of next week. I would be pretty surprised if he wasn't on the practice field in the middle of next week doing something, because that's sort of the next step for him, and was sort of the plan all along, is to get him on the field at late August, early September.
The injury was about a month ago at this point, right? It was
July 27th. Yeah, July 27th.
So not even a month ago yet. We're about 4 weeks. 27th to 1st to 8th to 15th to 22nd as we record this. We're about at 4 weeks. This is about the time where you would expect him to be back doing something. We know that they were going to play it cautious with him, so that makes sense. The other question related to that came to mind as you were answering that question, James, when does the media access change? That's a good point, I think, to talk about, as far as when you can watch full practice versus when it goes to the regular season. You can see 15 minutes of practice and then you're out of there.
Yeah, let me see here. I'm looking. So next week it changes. Yeah, it changes Wednesday. So it's that Wednesday, Thursday. So August 30th and 31st. So the last open practice to the media, the entire training camp open practice, would be Thursday. And then after that, yes. And then they travel to Washington. They play in Washington. Sunday's an off day. Team will meet on Monday as the coaches go through things. The front office goes through things. And then obviously cut down day is Tuesday. And so then they don't practice again until Wednesday. And so that's why you might as well give him this extra 5 days, basically, where it's meetings and roster gymnastics and all of those things. But I would be pretty surprised if we didn't see him out there on August 30th.
I wonder how much we'll even be able to see. That's going to be the difficult part. Like, you might see him out there. Is he warming up? Does it look like he's going to practice? And then we'll see. Do we get practice reports, or do those not even start until the following week?
They don't start until game week. You don't have to. So I honestly, I think their goal will be to get him in line to where when that first practice report comes out, it says full participant. Or he's not even listed, because I don't even think they would necessarily need to list him. I know this is a known injury, but it's if he practices in full, then there's no need to list him. So we'll see. And then they also could go the other way where he sits out 3 reps and then they put him as limited. Say, who knows? Who knows if he's going to play? Maybe you have to prepare for Jake Browning and Trevor Siemian, Cleveland Browns.
The Bengals could really play this tight to the vest if they wanted to.
And Zach's done that. I mean, he wouldn't even confirm that he's been throwing when I know, like, it's not hard to figure out if Joe Burrow's been throwing when you cover the team and you're in the building.
We've also seen it. Everyone's seen it.
But like regularly, like it's not like there's been an issue, a setback, anything like that. Like, no, everything's progressed well.
I don't think you would have heard Zach Taylor be as positive about how Joe Burrow looks and in general Joe Burrow's health on Monday if there had been a setback. Let's take one more question here about a specific player before we get into some of the roster general questions or unit questions. Grant Venable at Bamacuda on Twitter. How solid do you consider Charlie Jones to be a wide receiver for, given that his injury has limited his preseason? It's a bit of a trick question, I think, James, or it'll have a trick answer.
It is, because it's like, how solid do you feel like Chase Brown is as RB1?
Right.
You know, like, and I'm not trying to knock the question, because I get it. There's a lot of people, including myself, who thought that he could maybe overtake Trenton Irwin. But early in camp, Irwin said, nah, I'm wide receiver 4. He made play after play after play, whether it was from Burrow. Obviously, these 2 backup quarterbacks, he's made plays in the preseason. We've seen that, even though he's not taking a ton of snaps. And so I think he's entrenched as wide receiver 4. Charlie Jones is dealing with that shoulder, and that is bothering him a little bit. I think he's learning to play through it. I think he will be able to play through it. A lot of guys have done it, as Zach Taylor mentioned on Monday. And so define Charlie Jones's role. I think he's the backup slot.
Is he? That's the question. Is he the first slot receiver off the bench today? That was going to be my follow-up, because I don't know that that's 100%.
Who do you think it is?
I think it could still. I know Trenton Irwin has his struggles with the slot, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was him.
I think it's kind of like running back, where it's multiple guys. Yeah. Trenton Irwin would get his snaps. Charlie Jones would get his in the slot. They would move Jamar there some with Irwin outside, and then Higgins there with Irwin and Chase outside. Like, it would be this hybrid where it's not like Charlie Jones is this plug and play Tyler Boyd replacement this year, or at least in week 1 if something happened. But he would get his fair share of snaps in the slot, if that makes sense. It would be a unique hybrid version of it, which is fine. Be multiple. And I think Higgins and Chase are obviously multiple and versatile.
One thing we talked about yesterday, Mike and I, James, was Charlie Jones' snap count from preseason game 1 to preseason game 2 went from about 66-33 split out slot to out wide, about 66% of his slot snaps in the slot in preseason week 1 to 100% of his snaps in the slot in week 2. Obviously, we know we've talked about that they're trying to work him at slot. We talked about how that's a transition for him from where he played at Purdue, from outside to the slot, and how there's a learning curve there. But clearly the Bengals changed their preseason focus for Charlie Jones to be 100% slot focused. And that is his trajectory. That is his future. I just wonder if we will start the season that way with Charlie Jones. He'll have a chance to show that he's ready for that role here once again in preseason game number 3. Coming up next, James, let's get into some of these big, sweeping 53-man roster questions in the mailbag. It's that time of the preseason. We'll do that next.
Today's show is brought to you by Bird Dogs. One thing is for certain when it comes to Bird Dogs. If you want to look good, feel good, play good, well, you got to get Bird Dogs. And training camp has been hot. It's going to be really hot on Wednesday and Thursday. It was on Monday at practice. And I'm not complaining. Best job in the world. But guess what helps? Bird Dogs, because they have fabric that is going to keep you cool. Their sweat wicking fabric keeps you dry all day long. I've worn their shorts all camp long. They look great. They give your leg a nice sculpted look, even though if you skip leg day like Jake Lisco, it still works. I'm just kidding. Jake does leg day, but he wears Bird Dogs too, and you should. And it's not just shorts. No. Their joggers are a staple for me as the fall hits here in Cincinnati and I'm covering practice outside. You got to check it at birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL with promo code LockedOnNFL, and you're going to get a free white tech hat with your order. All you have to do right now, birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL. You're going to look good. You're going to feel good. Check them out today, birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL.
James, let's talk about this offensive line a little bit. Our next question from Eric at the Cincy Cat. For the final cuts on the offensive line, is there someone you can see edging out Jackson Carman for the final roster spot? I think Deontay Smith is a keeper. Nate Gilliam and Ben Brown look pretty interesting. And Eric thinks everyone wants to see Lel Collins as a backup. How do you see it breaking down? And this is something we've touched on a little bit. You can obviously start since I read the question, and then we'll get into it.
Well, Lel Collins, let's start there because I think he is the perfect stash. Hide him for a rainy day when something happens and you realize, oh my goodness, we need to unleash the beast. Just let him get as healthy as possible. He underwent that surgery in January. Obviously, it's August. And even though I think it's been like just over 7 months for him. It was early January. So with that said, the other guys, who could it be? Because if he's on the PUP list, you keep him on the PUP list and then take him off of it after week 4, and that gives him more time to heal. As far as Jackson Carman, I think it could come down to a Jackson Carman, Deontay Smith, Akeem Adeniji. And how many linemen do they want to keep? Do they want to keep 10? Because if so, maybe you fit all 3 of those guys. But maybe it's 9. And if they keep 9, I think they're most likely to release out of those 3. Probably Adeniji. Maybe you go Deontay Smith, although he's putting out some decent preseason tape, so you might not want to risk it. And so I think it would be one of those 2. Carman, I got to be honest, I think it's the second-round pick aspect of this. Across the league, they would wager, all right, well, he was the second rounder, has all these physical tools that haven't necessarily translated on the field, but someone would claim him. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the part of it when you look at these back end. Who's most likely to get claimed? And I think Adeniji could probably sneak through. That said, I still think that it would not shock me if they were able to move Carman in a trade. Not saying that it's likely, but I think that of those 3 guys, he's the one where the front office would be open to dealing here at the cut down day deadline.
Yeah, the challenge with Carman to release him, there's a ton of challenges, which is why they won't release him. One is that there's a dead cap hit. The other is that he's shown that he's much more comfortable at left tackle. The Bengals have 2 guys that can play left tackle, in Jonah Williams, who's going to start at right tackle, but would move over to left tackle, we believe, if Orlando Brown were to be unable to play left tackle for any number of plays. But Orlando Brown is also obviously going to play left tackle. So when you have 2 guys that are starting on your offensive line who are going to be your first 2 left tackles, and Jackson Carman is at best your 3rd left tackle, that's where the value to the Bengals might not be quite as high as the value to other teams that are looking for maybe even a starting left tackle, because Carman showed in the postseason last year that you can survive with Carman at left tackle. In the case of the Bills game, you can even thrive. And depending on your offense, if you need a guy who's going to get out there and maul people in the run game, Jackson Carman's really good at that. So there's no way that Carman makes it through waivers for whatever his issues are with the right side, for whatever his issues have been in terms of inconsistency and pass protection, where the flashes are there and you just don't see it consistently. There's no way he makes it through waivers, right? So he's on this team unless they decide to trade him. The likelihood of that trade, I think, is nebulous. I don't think there's. I mean, somebody tweeted about this today. I don't remember who it was. There hasn't been a single trade in the NFL since training camp started, which isn't terribly uncommon. But since there's only one cutdown day anymore, you can get your best look at all these guys, get as much information as you can, and make those decisions as late as possible. Outside of Carman, Max Sharping is the other guy that I have currently on my 53-man projection, James, that there's not really much more of a question for me. I think he's the first interior lineman off the bench right now for this team. And then after that, I think it's all questions. It's Deontay Smith, Hakeem Adeniji, Trey Hill, Cody Ford for 2 spots. And you probably keep one of those interior guys and 1 tackle. Hakeem Adeniji and Deontay Smith aren't terribly different players. Honestly, in my opinion, Trey Hill and Cody Ford aren't terribly different players either, except Trey Hill also has some experience at center. But they prefer Cody Ford, based on my understanding. So that's kind of where I think the offensive line is for the 53.
Yeah, I think you're pretty close. It really is interesting to see how it's evolved. I think that they do have good depth there for the first time in a while, and I know it's wild because I think we're used to talking about like a lot of these backups because of injuries and stuff, but hopefully we just don't see many of them this year. And Lael gets back, they keep him. I think that's big now.
Yes,
to keep him. Because if you don't, then man, I don't want to be one injury away from banking on Carman for a bunch of weeks. And that's what Lael does, is it prevents that, at least one injury wise from that. Let's keep things going. And I don't even know how to say this name, but that's we'll go to the next one. I'll make you say that name. Robbie at RobBobUK5 says, who do you think could be a shocking roster cut at the 53-man roster deadline?
Well, this goes hand in hand with the name that you can't read. But
go ahead.
We'll talk about, I think it's Johan Rooney. That's my guess.
It started with an E and then it went elsewhere. And I'm like, I'm not going to butcher that just because I don't want to disrespect our listeners and Twitter followers. Shout out to y'all.
It's apparently Owen. I've just Googled it. It's apparently an Irish spelling.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Owen.
All right. Well, I can do that.
I don't know.
Okay.
You can correct us. Mr. Rooney? I don't even, I assume. Anyway, his question was, who do you think
trying to get in trouble?
Who do you think will be the surprise player that makes a team that no one expects to make the team? So these questions are 2 sides of the same coin. A shocking cut that is realistic. I think the only name that comes to mind for me, and I don't expect this to be clear, but the only name that comes to mind to me is Stanley Morgan Jr. And I don't think that's happening. But outside of that, who would they cut that they realistically would cut that we've talked about as a roster lock?
Not as a roster lock, but I'll give you a couple surprises. One, we've just said it. We don't think they're going to cut Jackson Carman. What if they do?
Okay.
But what if he goes out there on Saturday, struggles again, and they're like, you know what?
Would be shocking. Yeah, you're right.
So there's one. I'll give you another one. I think Chris Evans would be a surprise right now. Shock, maybe. Actually, I'm close to shock. Like I don't really know how I don't know how they cut him. I really don't, because he might be RB2.
Yeah, so I would be very surprised with this. On the defensive side of the ball, Jay Tufele is the closest thing at this point to a surprise. A lot of people are talking, apparently, I haven't seen this, but I've seen other people saying, stop talking about releasing Josh Tupou. That would be shocking to me as well. Apparently people are thinking about that. I would be shocked.
Would you trade Josh Tupou?
No.
And keep Dominique Davis?
No.
I agree. Just asking. It was something that was floated to me, not by anyone in the organization, to be clear, like a talking head personality. And I was like, I don't think so, even though they're deep in that D-line room. No, I'm okay.
The interior defensive line.
Keep your dudes. Keep your dudes.
Yeah.
And he's one of the dudes.
Let's talk about some surprises that may make the team. The other side of this coin, Owen's question. We'll finish up the show with a breakout candidate. We'll do that next.
Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you're making the right hire and you have access to the best, most qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they are number one for small businesses. And whether it's their simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on the candidates with the right skills, the right experience that you're looking for, or their reach. They're going to reach so many candidates to find the right one. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster, and you get to post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, James. Owen's question. The much hyped name, Owen Rooney 8. The surprise to make the team. A guy we haven't talked about as much, perhaps. Who's on your mind?
Oh, the surprise to make the team. See, I couldn't read the name, so I didn't read the question. So it actually surprised me a little bit. Okay. The surprise to make the team. It's tough. I don't think there are many. I think it's not going to surprise me if Travion Williams makes it. I think he's going to make it. I think it would surprise me at this point and today if Tanner Hudson makes it. He had a nice couple of catches, but to me, Mitch Wilcox, clearly activating him means we want him on the roster. They could have left him on PUP and let it play out a little bit and done some roster gymnastics. So to me, it would be Tanner Hudson. Outside of that, would it surprise me if Sidney Jones made it and they went with a veteran? It wouldn't surprise me, even though I have DJ Ivy ahead of him right now. I guess, you know what it would surprise, the other one that would surprise me? If they kept 5 safeties and Mike Thomas. Mm-hmm. And I know he's valuable. I think he's going to stay in the building anyways. He's a veteran. He controls his own destiny. There's no waiver claims or nothing like that. You bring him back to the practice squad. It's real easy to do. You leave his parking spot, you leave his locker, and he comes back a few days later. That's what the Sunday through Wednesday could be. He could be back in the building Wednesday or Thursday, certainly for game week. I wonder if that's one. I think if they kept him, that would surprise me a bit.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty clear delineation around guys who might make the team and who look to be on the outs. Like Cedric Jackson having a great preseason, not going to make the team. There's just no room for him, right? But some guys that could be surprising to make the team. Tanner Hudson was the first name that came to mind for me as well. A guy that looked like he could be tight end 3. Mitchell Wilcox coming back changes that immediately. As soon as that's announced, I go into my 53-man projection and change the name to Wilcox. But Drew Sample, I think, is still safe. So Devin Asiasi, Tanner Hudson, and I think in the opposite order, both of those guys would be very surprising. Asiasi, I think, would be behind Hudson. Trent Taylor, another guy that would be a surprise to make the team. I don't see that happening. It's hard to pick a surprise and say, yep, this is a surprise that I think is going to happen, unless you'd be surprised that Cody Ford or Josh Tupou would make the team, which you shouldn't be if you listen to this show. But I think those guys are ahead. Josh Tupou much more so than Cody Ford in their respective battles. Like Tupou, I think, is easy roster lock, and just Cody
Agreed.
Ford seems to be in that general vicinity to a lesser degree as well. But yeah, it's really hard to find a surprise to make the team. I think if you would have asked this question before training camp, the answer probably would have been DJ Ivy as a guy that had that potential to push for a roster spot as a potential surprise. And the way training camp is gone, he looks like he's on the team now. What's your one more?
Trent Taylor.
I said that one.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. I missed that one when you were talking. Of course, that's what I do. I was reading questions ahead. What are the odds of that though? 1%?
I mean, how are you doing it?
They
We
would
just
have.
talked about Stanley Morgan being a shocking.
This is how they would do it. This is how they would do it. Good. So I'm at least adding to the conversation, but because I missed that, you would shut down Charlie Jones. You'd say, nah, shoulder wise, let's let this heal.
Shutting down Charlie Jones means you're going to go have the surgery now instead of later. That's all that means, right?
Correct. Yes. But that's, and I don't think that's really on the table, but I think that's the only way he makes the team. I think they're comfortable with Charlie Jones as a punt returner. We haven't seen it a lot. I think they're fine with him fielding the ball. As far as after the catch and all that stuff, fine. But it's not like Trent Taylor's great at that. Super dynamic. So that's the path to it. So
who's the next guy to return punts if Charlie Jones does not return punts and Trent Taylor is not on the team?
It's those two.
So say it's game day and Trent Taylor's not active. Who's the next guy if they need another guy?
Whew. You could put Lassiter back there.
So again, say it's game day. Lassiter and Trent Taylor aren't on the team.
Boyd.
Right?
Boyd would be like one of the emergency guys.
Just go fair catch it.
I wonder if they would try DJ Turner. You know,
did he do it?
He would be active.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the active guys. But no, I mean, they might just throw Boyd back there, honestly.
Just say go catch the ball.
Yeah, I mean, because think about it, you're right. Like, who else is active on game day that would do it?
Yeah, I don't.
And you're not going to have Yoshi do it. He's never done it. He could do kickoffs for you, but you can't do punts. It's different.
Have you seen DJ Turner back there at all in camp? Because he did return punts rarely, but he had 41 punt returns, I think, in college.
I think he's worked on it a little bit, not a ton. It's not something he's regularly done, but he probably should, because if Cheeto's back.
Sorry,
why wouldn't you?
He had 3 punt returns in college. He played on the punt return team, but only had 3 returns himself.
I was going to say 41 would be a lot because I haven't noticed him that much, but I think he has gotten some work as a punt returner, I want to say. So
that's interesting, though, when you talk about Kwame Lassiter, Trent Taylor, and their value to the team. If they need that next guy at punt returner, Trent Irwin is listed on the Our Lads depth chart. Has Trent Irwin been back?
Yeah, he has. He has done it some. Now that I think about it, it would be Irwin. I can't believe I forgot about Irwin. God, he's just so overlooked. It would be Irwin. That's who they would put back there. That's exactly who it would be because he's always active. It would be Irwin.
Yeah.
Man, I hope Darren Simmons. I hope the entire coaching staff just doesn't listen to this.
Yeah,
or maybe just the first 20 minutes and then
just turn it off.
Yeah.
Don't hear us not know who your backup punt returner is.
Trent Taylor, he just said it, bro. Okay, it's my bad.
Matthew Duffy for our last question today, James. At Matthew J. Duffy 22.
Yeah.
Who's the player with the most potential to break out this year?
Oh, so Zach Carter's certainly up there after that move he put on Alex Kappa in practice on Monday. I tweeted that video out. I know it got Jake Lisco's eye.
Great move.
Trying to think of someone that could be like, because obviously Joseph Osai is going to get named. I think Dax Hill is an obvious breakout candidate. Some would probably say Chase Brown. Maybe you go with Chris Evans. I don't think Andre Yosavash is really a breakout candidate. Charlie Jones, I wouldn't put in that category either. So I just named them all to say the only other one you could probably name. I think Irv Smith Jr. be a little bit of a breakout candidate. And he's going to be a decent part of this offense. I'll say 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, and make some big plays.
It's nice when you have that many breakout candidates. Like, obviously, you have the superstars of wide receiver. Joe Mixon's going to do Joe Mixon things. Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. He's that guy.
I left you someone, though. You someone. Hopefully you take
2, I think you left me. Cam Sample is 1.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been very impressed with Cam Sample this preseason. I was impressed with Cam Sample down the stretch last year. And if he's added some pass rush to his game, which he's shown at times, and that could just be the disparity of backup offensive linemen and backup defensive linemen in this league, where backup offensive linemen are generally just behind backup defensive linemen. Cam Sample's impressed me this preseason. The other one is Cordell Volson is the other one. And I don't know who you're thinking of.
You missed it. You missed it. I got one more then. Go ahead.
But Cordell Volson's the other one. Jonah Williams, maybe? Cordell Volson's the other one.
Nope.
That stands out to me as a guy that we were talking about, like, would they look to replace him? Obviously, that was misguided, looking to upgrade at that position. They had a lot of belief in him going into year 2, and it sounds like they're pretty pleased with him so far. We haven't seen him on the game day field at all, so probably won't until the regular season. But Cordell Volson, another one, year 2, could take a big step. Who's the one that I'm not thinking of?
Cam Taylor-Britt.
Oh, yeah. Duh.
I mean, obvious. Had a great camp. He's dealing with Jamar Chase every day, and that sucks. It sucks to have to face Jamar and T, and it's mostly Jamar, but it's been those other guys too. So, yeah, I think Cam Taylor-Britt could certainly have a huge year.
Yeah. I think he looks like an easy quality starter in the NFL.
Yeah.
This year.
He's made a leap. Turner looks good. Cheeto looking good. That safety room looks better. They're going to be better than people think too, at least nationally. I think that secondary is good.
Should be. I've loved what I've seen from Dax Hill in the preseason.
My guy.
In extended run, the only defensive starter that's played as much as he's played the most out of all the defensive starters.
2-3. Don't mess with them.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. We've got one more day of training camp practice, or 2 more days of training camp practice, but one more day of training camp practice will be the focus of this show. Then we'll have a game preview for you for preseason game 3. The things we'll be looking for as the Bengals are trying to make some of these roster decisions. That's the rest of the week here on Locked On Bengals. Until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.